Greetings all. Today I shall be purging the heretic and rousing the faithful, as I put together an Imagifier for my Adeptus Sororitas, the Battle Sisters. Now, Games Workshop has a great looking Imagifier already, but I have a spare squad from the Combat Patrol box, and a bunch of parts burning a hole in my bits box, and a deep desire to kit bash something. So with that in mind, I shall begin. I'm going to start by removing the Simulacrum Bearer from the Battle Sister squad, cleaning up the body parts and gluing them together. The base model will be pretty similar to the original, as the only real difference between the Simulacrum Bearer and the Imagifier is a fancier pole and a hood, which I'm sure we can replicate easy enough. Now, my first change from the regular pole bearer will be the weapon. My intention with the Imagifier is that she will be along similar lines to a Space Marine Ancient, a veteran sister who is intoning the wisdom of her tales, so I'm going to start that by looking for an older mark of bolt gun. To begin with this, I will use my knife to carefully take off the original weapon, preserving as much of both parts as possible, as I would like to keep this gun with its Inquisition symbol for something else. And once the gun is off, I can clean up that hand a little to make a better join later on. And this is the gun I shall be replacing it with, from the Horus Heresy Mark VI Space Marines. A fairly plain, standard bolt gun, admittedly, but it is a much older design, so it will help with the idea that it's being used by a long-term veteran. With my knife and quite a bit of care, I'm going to remove this gun from the Space Marine hand like before, but this time making sure to keep the gun as intact as possible, as the hand is quite superfluous to requirements. Now, the front end of the gun will require a lot more cutting and preparation work, as that left hand needs to be gone. However, the older bolt gun has a much simpler front end without the ridges for grip, so it's not as bad as first thought. A few careful cuts to get rid of the bulk of that hand, and then the remainder can be trimmed and shaped to look as though it was never there. That being said, this area will be covered up a little later. Purity seals are your friend. With that gun all cleaned up, I can then add some plastic glue and attach the hand and gun together. Before we go too much further, however, I'm just going to quickly snip off that nice Aquila from the handle, as that will work quite well with the Imagifier, I believe. Whilst that all sets a bit, I think it's time to deal with her pole. The one I have here is from the kit I am using for the body, and whilst it is nice, it's just not quite fancy enough for an Imagifier. If you left it with this, she would just feel quite left out if she glanced across the battlefield and saw the standard one waving that giant ivory lady around. No. Instead, I'm going to replace it with this one here from the Blade Guard Ancient that I had lying around in my bits box from an earlier conversion. The size of this dead saint is much more impressive, and I feel pretty sure that she will be happy to lug this into battle, droning on to the younglings about how in her day the heretics were much worse and that it was probably uphill both ways, etc, etc. Now, as my clippers are definitely not blunt, I decided to use my knife to take this pole off, clean it up, and remove its mould lines. Also, now is a good time to use the very tip of the knife to make a little indent right in the centre of both the pole of the Skelly Topper and the pole of the pole that she's holding, as I'm going to be pinning them together for a stronger bond that will hopefully survive the attention of my cat and children. Using those indents as a guide, I can take my hobby drill and a 1mm drill bit and drill it about 2 to 3 millimeters deep, or as deep as you are brave enough to go on this thin pole, before taking some super glue and some 1mm wire, paper clips work quite nicely for this, and inserting a piece of glued wire into one of the holes, in this case on the pole. Once this has had a second to set, I can take an old pair of cutters, which are even more blunt, and trim the wire off around the same length as the hole that I drilled in the topper. It is important to try and keep a hold of the part here and not the random wire you're cutting off, as they have a habit of flying apart when you cut them, and 10 minutes of searching behind the bench isn't as much fun as it sounds, trust me. Once I had rescued that arm from the depths of oblivion and removed some cat hair, I can add some super glue to the exposed wire and insert this into the hole in the topper, completing the Imagifier's pole, and after a second or two for the super glue to set, the arm can then be added to the body with some plastic glue. I recommend holding this for a little while as this topper is real heavy. For the head of this venerable lady, I'm going to opt to use the hooded head from the Combat Patrol's Cannon S, as it is sculpted both with a hood, which fits the Imagifier model well, but is also clearly a much older lady, which works for my plan quite nicely. Now, I was really pleased here to find out that the tab on the bottom of this head is exactly right to fit onto the body I'm using. However, it would have been easy enough to cut off, so a touch of plastic glue and it's on with her head. Next up will be a touch of glue into the armpit, and the left arm with its bolter can be attached in place. Now she is almost ready to tell her tales on the battlefield, but a finishing touch will be to take a couple of these purity seals, which I believe came from the Rhino kit. These will be removed from the sprue and added to the front end of her bolt gun, both covering up any dodgy cuts and giving her more of a decorated veteran look. And with that, she just needs some paint and a base, and my Imagifier is ready to bore her sisters with tall tales from the past, to the point that they get so fed up that they take it out on the enemy. The astute of you will notice here that there's an extra purity seal on that gun. I didn't realise my camera had shut off there, so I apologise. One day, I will do a video with no mistakes in it. Possibly. Perhaps my sanity is slipping a bit, but I had a lot of fun with this one, even though it's technically just a simple case of swapping weapons and head. Once again, it proves that you can do a lot with just a few changes. No one is going to mistake this lady for a regular Simulacrum bearer. The thought that there's a blade guard ancient scratching his head somewhere trying to work out where his banner pole went, and why there's a shed of skulls and a stick in its place, was certainly an amusing one to me. If you enjoyed this video at least half as much as I did making it, then why not subscribe, drop a like, comment, share to your friends even. And if you didn't, then why not share to your enemies to punish them for whatever it is they need punishing for. If you've done any of these already, then you have my thanks. It's not far to get to the 1000 sub mark, and when we get there I'll likely do an army reveal, as I'm aware that there are a few people hoping for one of those. Anyways, with that, I shall attempt to recover what's left of my sanity, and we'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, and have a good one all.